How's it going, everyone? It's Geoff Chrysler, a detail enthusiast, back with my next episode of my BN1 restoration. Well, restoration's over and now it's maintenance. So we've got her off the road now for the winter. We've got several months to address any issues that I noted throughout the driving season this year. So I've got a checklist and I've been going through it. So in this video, I'll show I'm going to be doing the replacing the rear hub seals because they were leaking a little bit. I'm rebuilding the front suspension just because of concours. I want to get the proper castle nuts on the top of these kingpins, and so that's it's a big job. So also addressing the tappet noise was never fully cured. I made it a lot better, but it's still been kind of bugging me. It's still too loud, so I've decided to get in there and replace the tappets because the ones I have in there may be a bad batch that I've heard of that was out a number of years ago. So let's get into it. Okay, so for removing these hubs, as you can see, I first of all removed the hub from the drum, pulled and then undid the drum. It's just got a little set screw there, and then I was able to with the drum off, pull the set screw and remove the axle shaft. And now I'm trying to pull the hub, and because I don't have the special Austin hub pulling tool, you know, we have to make do with what we've got. So I've got this piece of oak, solid oak wood in there. And of course, I've already undone the special octagonal nut and its corresponding washer. Here's the special tool for it, just from Moss Motors. So with those out of the way, like I say, I've got that solid piece of oak, and I'm just putting the hub back on and tightening down the bolts in a star pattern to slowly pull the hub off as it's pressing against the inner axle tube. And of course, because it's wood, it's not going to destroy the threads there. Okay, and there we go. The hub is off, and as you can see, once I got down to a certain point using this block of wood, you know, like this, running the outer hub onto the inner hub, I got to a certain point where this was no longer going to work, so I had to cut it to length and turn it on end, and it actually went inside of the hub here. I ran the knockoff on for it to butt against. It went down through, and as you can see, it's just the right size to just connect with that. And you can see I've got it riding on that center hub. It's not going to cause any damage to the threads. And yeah, as I keep tightening down the two bolts, you can see I've got them parallel with the wood so that they're pushing on the right spot, and I just do like half a turn, half a turn, half a turn, just back and forth, and you can just see the hub pulling right off. Works like a charm. Now I can get in there and replace that oil seal with a new one and put it all back together. Now for removing the bearing first, as you can see, I got this plastic block which I use all the time, and it actually fits in there perfectly, so I can tap down on that and just keep rotating it so I'm getting an even distribution, and pop it out that way. So I've got my new oil seals here from Auto Farm. Thanks guys, and as you can see in the picture, it shows you the direction that the oil seal goes in, so that that surface sticks out, that surface goes in. So pretty clear there. So I've, again, using plastic tools, I've tapped that in there nice and even. And so now I can reinstall the bearing. I'm just gonna grease it up with some assembly grease first, and we'll pop that back in there. Okay, so you can see I've now tapped that bearing into place after packing it full of grease, both sides, and new oil seal is pressed in there, and so it's ready to go back onto the car. And we'll just carefully tap it on nice and easy onto the axle there. Okay, and there you have it. The hub is back on, and of course, you put on that special washer, which has a little tab that engages. So you put the tab in and then pop the washer on and then run the nut on, and of course tighten it down with my special wrench there and get it nice and tight. And you'll find that it comes pretty much even, maybe half a thread past the end of this thing, of the tube, and you know it's home. And so yeah, tighten it down and then tap down the washer so that thing can't turn. And that finishes it off. So now we can put the axle shaft back in, of course, with a new sealing gasket. And one thing before I offer these gaskets up, I like to give them a spray of this copper spray gasket. I do both sides, give it a nice even coating, and then offer it up. It makes a nice seal. Okay, so there's the half shafts back in, and I put the little set screw back in, so that's ready to go. And now I can put the drum back on. And here we are, I've just shoved the brake drum back on, and always got to make sure when you're putting this back on, same thing with the half shaft, you have to line up the little set screw. There's a countersink for it, so the half shaft has a set screw that's right there underneath, and then when you put the brake drum on, it's got a set screw that goes into the half shaft right here. So you got to make sure that those line up so you can put the set screw back in. So just doing that now, and then I can put the outer hub back on. So just tighten that down. And there you have it. The hubs are retorqued to 65 pounds each, and we're good to go. So on to the next thing. Okay, and now I'm gonna shift gears here and get into replacing the tappets. So lots to remove step by step. I've just removed the air filters themselves. They just have little center screw each one. And now I'm gonna proceed to remove the choke mechanism here. I'm gonna mark exactly where it is so I can put it back easily. So I'll get the choke cable out of the way and the fuel lines. So just removing the fuel lines here, you can see I've pulled out the bolts and the fiber washers, and you just got to be careful because these guys are your little screen filters are on a spring inside of here. So those pop out as you pull the fuel line away. So moving right along here, I've got the heater pipe studs came right out with the nuts. That's no problem, makes it easier to put back in. I've disconnected the choke cable and got it out of the way. I've loosened off this nut for the throttle linkage. I've just got to get that fully off, and then I can undo those nuts for removing the intake manifold with the carburetors all included. Okay, and there you have it. The carburetors and intake manifold have been lifted clear out of the way. I did end up having to unscrew those the fuel overflow tubes after I had pulled it out. They were kind of in the way. I couldn't get it out cleared of the shroud. So I unscrewed those in position. It was pretty easy. I can put them back in the same way. I'll just kind of offer it up and screw them on just before I put it onto the studs there. And then this, the vacuum line, I had to unscrew that as well before I undid everything. It was very tricky to get undone. I just had to do it quarter turn at a time, reaching up and under the carburetor bowl there, but we got her out. So next steps here is I'm going to remove this linkage. I'll pull the spring off of here, pull this whole linkage off of here, and then I can pull out the exhaust manifold, unbolt it here, and get that out of there, and then we will have gained access to the tappet cover. Okay, and the exhaust and manifold are out of the way, so that gives us clear access to this tappet cover here. So I can first start by removing the downpipe here, and then the tachometer mechanism there, and then one by one remove these. Just about got this totally out of here. Just wanted to make a note here. So yeah, you have to actually pull this clear for that to be able to pull out the tachometer housing there. And there are 1, 2, 3 bolts that you have to pre-start when I offer this thing back in there. Otherwise, you'll never get them in those holes. It's really impossible to access, get the bolt straight onto the hole because other things are in the way. So those 3 bolts have to be pre-started for offering this back into the car. Good notes to make. And there you have it. The side cover is lifted off. So there we are. There's your tappets and push rods down there. And so to get the push rods out, I'm just actually, I've taken off all the bolts, including the oil feed line, and I'm just gonna lift the entire rocker shaft off in one go, and then pull the push rods out, keeping them all numbered so they go back into the same spot. And yeah, we'll have a look at the tappets. Okay, and here are the tappets removed, and I've had a good, with each one, as I pulled it out, I gave it a back and forth just to see if there's any side-to-side play, because, I have a client who had that on his BN2. He had some nasty tappet noise, and when he pulled the side cover and started pulling them out, he noticed a couple of them had some bad scoring on the sides, and they were actually rocking back and forth. So he actually had to re-sleeve the block where the tappets go to get a tighter fit. I mean, they should be able to turn freely in there, but there shouldn't be any side-to-side play. And luckily, with every single one of these, there was 0 side-to-side play. Like, you had to really pull it straight up and out to get it out of there. Now, I've just been going through the old tappets in better lighting, and I've got them all cleaned up. And these 2 are by far the worst 2. The rest of them are pretty smooth and even. They've all got that swirling effect, but these 2 have some actual, you can see little divots in them, whereas the other ones don't. This one almost looks like a bit of cracking starting there. So I'm really hoping that it's just these tappets which are not great. You know, that's a lot of wear for, you know, just 1,000 miles of driving. Only 1,000 miles in a season. So the new lightened ones with better lubrication should hopefully be much better. Like I say, I believe these are from a batch that I've heard a few other people have had trouble with them cracking and breaking up. Like, I don't think they were hardened properly when they were manufactured. So now I just wanted to show you these new tappets that I've got from AH Spares. These are their new lightened, better lubricating ones. And you can see there's a little flat on each one right where the oil hole is, which is going to allow oil to come down on and lubricate the surface there much more efficiently than without that little flat. So yeah, got these new ones here. I'm going to pop them all in place. Like I say, I'm going to use some of this cam lube on them to start them off, and we'll do the proper run-in procedure of 2,000 RPM for like 20 minutes, and make sure they nicely seat and see if it improves anything. Hopefully it will. Okay, and there's all the tappets, the new tappets reinstalled. Each one, I gave it a good smear of this Rev Lube just on the bottom face that rides on the cam. Gave it a good smear of that, and then oiled each one, filled up the thing and rubbed it all over the outside and into the little dish, and then popped them each one in place. And then I've installed now the push rods as well, and filled the little dish with the oil, and then with each push rod I squished it out and it would give it a nice coat. So those are nicely lubricated and installed. So now I've just been going along and cleaning this face up with a razor blade, and so I'm just about ready to reinstall the side cover. Okay, and here we are coming back together. I've got the new tappets in there, and I've just now placed the tappet cover after repainting it and doing all the hardware separately. It's quite a trick. Like I say, I used a bit of painter's tape and held in 1, 2, those three bolts just into position so I could offer it in place. And of course I had some of that copper gasket sealer on the gasket, on the new gasket. So I got a nice seal all the way around there. And yeah, just offered it into place, put a couple of the top ones in, and then just work them all evenly and got a nice seal, and looks really good. Okay, and there the exhaust manifold is reinstalled. Obviously I've cleaned up the paint on it, and I've got the exhaust joined up to it again, and yeah, went on really nice. Obviously brand new gasket there. I used more like the tubes of the similar copper gasket sealer, so it's high heat. Yeah, got a good seal there, and I've run these nuts on just to tighten it down while the gasket sealer dries, and then you know, a couple days from now I'll come back in and touch in the paint, and like I say, I still got to put the intake manifold back on, obviously, so those nuts are just temporary to hold the exhaust while that dries. But yeah, came along nice. I've got all this reinstalled with the throttle return spring. So with that side cover in place, as you can see, I've taken off the down pipe. I figure, well, I've got this apart and the manifold's off, I'm going to do another thing from my list. Because of the oil leak that I've always had, I'm going to try and reduce that some by installing a PCV valve system. Mike Salter recently published an article on how to do that, and he basically put a pipe fitting into the bottom of the cross tube on the intake manifold and ran a tube going down into the side of the down pipe. And in the side of the down pipe, that's where you put your PCV valve, and you just put a plug in the bottom of the down pipe to seal that off. So suddenly you've got manifold pressure helping to alleviate the crankcase pressure and drawing that out. So I'm gonna have to get some machining done. I bought a secondary cross pipe that I can do the machining to and keep my original one unharmed, and same thing with the down pipe. I was able to get a replacement one of those to send out for machining. Okay, and so here is my newly modified intake manifold cross pipe. You can see Mike just silver soldered a pipe fitting onto the bottom of it. So there will be a tube coming off of that screws on, that comes down to the side vent on the side of the block. But that's coming later. That'll be with the PCV valve. But for now, I can put this together, reassemble my manifold, and get the carburetors and all that back together on the car. As you can see, I've pre-assembled this pipe. I've got a new fresh gasket in there, and used some of the Permatex sealant. This is the kind that's impervious to gasoline, because it's an intake manifold. You want to make sure you use the right kind for the right purpose. So this is, I'm going to now pre-paint this. I've got fresh paint, so I'm going to pre-paint all these parts so that they've got good coverage, and then I'll offer it up to the car. And again, it'll be some more of that sealant where the manifolds connect. And here we are, freshly painted again and ready to assemble to the car. Kind of pre-assembled it, offer it up with this piece on, and then fit it in position on the car, and then I'll make up some of this into like a little tube and wrap it around the pipe where it goes in there, and then squish this down against it and tighten it up to make a nice tight seal, gland seal there. So you can see this is that JB steel weld. I've just cut a nice slice off of the stick, and you can see there's two layers in there, so I've got to knead this together and blend both those layers into a uniform color, and then I've got about 5 to 10 minutes of working time before it sets up hard like steel. So I'm going to make this into like a tube and wrap it around to make a gland seal around that intake manifold pipe. Okay, and there we are. The intake manifold is now reinstalled. Like I say, I used some more of that fuel resistant sealant as I offered it up to the head, and I used some of that JB steel weld to make a new gland seal for this side, and just rolled it out into a little tube, and carefully I used like a flat blade screwdriver as a tool to help me shove it into the little opening in the manifold part here, and just wrapped it around carefully and shoved it in there, and then tightened this plate down against it, and it squished out the sides a little bit. I've got a really nice seal there now, and just let everything dry, and then I can start reinstalling the carburetors and that. I will have to, here's this fitting that I've added to the cross pipe here, and there will be a pipe screwed onto there that's going to drop down underneath and connect to the down pipe on the other side there. And here is the rest of my PCV valve system. So just got this in the mail from Mike Salter. Thanks a lot, Mike. This is going to be great. So yeah, this is what screws on, is going to replace the down pipe, the vent pipe on the side of the block there. It comes out of the tappet cover. So that'll screw in place, and the PCV valve is just in here, and then here's the pipe going up to screw on to the bottom of the cross pipe of the intake manifold. So that's the whole system. Well, I'm going to pre-paint this just in the engine green color, so it'll hopefully blend in with everything and kind of disappear. And this is the rocker cover vent pipe that goes from the rocker cover out to the air filter. And Mike also sent me a plastic plug. I've shoved it in there now and I can't fish it out, but he sent me a little plastic plug that is going to block that off, so that this is our ventilation. So we'll get it all painted and then reinstalled and see how it works. Okay, and here we are reassembled with there you can see there's my PCV just sneaking down there. Barely detectable. And it goes into the side of the block just underneath of that exhaust manifold there. You can barely see it just under there. And yeah, hopefully will make a big difference and reduce my oil leak, if not totally eliminate it. So yeah, this is looking really good. On to the next thing. Okay, and of course, while I'm at it, I'm going to be draining the oil and changing the filter and oil. And I think I'm actually going to end up pulling this pan off and seeing if I can get it any smoother. And I want to have a good look at the cam. There's a number of reasons I would like to have a good inspection of things in there. I want to see if I can perhaps tap in the rear dowel seals a little better, so that I can hopefully get a better seal. I'm wondering, I've read that can be a problem, is those rear dowel seals, if they're not tapped all the way home, and we did have quite a hard time getting those in there when we rebuilt the engine. So yeah, I'm gonna have a look at those, and yeah, we'll see what we find when we get the pan off. Okay, and here we are with the oil pan off. So here's the rear end. You can see the camshaft there. You can give it a nice inspection. So with the cam, what I'm doing here is just going along, giving it a visual inspection, and of course feeling it with my fingers just to feel if there's any sort of ridges or wear patterns, and these are all really nice and smooth. I've checked every one, so happy about that. Things seem to be healthy and happy under here. So yeah, nice to have a look. I don't think I'll be doing this again. Once I get this oil pan looking a little better, we'll reinstall it, hopefully for the last time. Now, one more thing I'll point out here is you can see in the back we've got 1, 2, those are the dowel seals that go in with this rear main cap. And I've been wondering, because I recall when we put those in, it was really hard to get them pressed down all the way down, because they're these felt seals and they're a little bit oversized and you got to squish them in there, and it's pretty tricky to get them all the way in there. And I've always been wondering with this leak at the rear main seal if maybe they're not all the way home, and So what I did was I took an appropriate size punch and hammered them in there. Well, I got one in almost half an inch, a quarter of an inch at least in further. The other one was almost a quarter as well. And then I took a new dowel seal and squished it in there and cut it off level again. So that might help the oil leak at the rear. So we'll see. It certainly won't hurt to squish some more in there and hopefully get a better seal and pound those further in. So yeah, hopefully that'll help, and that in conjunction with the PCV system, we'll see how we do. And here's my oil pan here. You can see that's pretty rough. So yeah, I mean, it was worse when I initially had it, and that's the best I could do a couple of years ago when I rebuilt this. So yeah, I'm gonna spend a lot more time and try to get that as perfect as I can, and then of course repaint it and new gasket and everything, and we'll reinstall it. Okay, and there we go. The oil pan is all reinstalled, and wow, that looks a lot better than it was. So unfortunately my frame members are a little dented still, but oh well, at least it's original. So that's a lot better. So we're gonna let that dry overnight because I've got fresh sealant in there, and maybe a few days from now, I'll give it a really long time to dry. I'll fill it with oil, and we'll be all set. Now, next thing on my list, I am once again gonna get in here and remove my brake master cylinder, as well as the feed line and reservoir up in the top side. This thing has been slowly seeping. It's always got a drip right here. I've just wiped it off recently, but it constantly has a little drip right here, and well, that's no good. And also, I've realized, reaching around and just trying to feel where anything might be leaking, the reservoir itself is leaking out of the bottom. So I'm gonna take it all out of there and rebuild it and reseal it, and try to get much better seals on everything, and of course re-bleed all the brakes. Okay, and here I've got the brake master cylinder apart, and I've flushed it all out, and it's all nice and super clean inside. And I'm gonna rebuild it. I've got a new rebuild kit here with all new rubber, so I'll put the new seal on properly and replace these outer bellows and get it all back together. Okay, and here we are with the repainted and redeckled brake reservoir. So that's just been installed, and like I say, I took it to the bench and really tightened down the bottom fittings, and I got like half a turn out of it, I guess, so hopefully it'll be a lot tighter. And I put a little bit of sealant on the threads, making sure to keep it right away from the line so there's not any contamination possibility. So hopefully it'll be nice and sealed now. I'm not sure if the master cylinder itself was leaking or if it was all just from this, because it was like capillary action just trickling down the line. It was the line itself you could feel was just wet, and I think it was potentially just soaking the master cylinder body under here. So, but regardless, I got that all rebuilt with a new rebuild kit, so all new rubbers, and so the brake lines are all reattached. Everything's good and tight. So now I can go get some new fresh brake fluid and bleed the whole system. Okay, so I've just finished bleeding the brakes, and did it myself this time, and I went at it a little different than I've ever done. Following an article Mike Salter wrote on his blog about bleeding 100 brakes, I decided to let gravity do the job for me. So I just went around to all 4 wheels and cracked all 4 bleed screws, and then just put a cup under each wheel to catch the fluid, and just waited and made sure I filled up the reservoir and kept an eye on that reservoir to make sure it never got low. And after, it took a while, it took about 45 minutes to an hour for all 4 wheels to have a constant drip, 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 drip flow. And then I shut off each one and then bled each wheel individually. I bled them myself just by, you know, have my little feed cup with a hose on the wheel, crack the screw and get under the car, pull the pedal down by hand, and then I would use a C-clamp to clamp the pedal down and then go turn off the valve. And did, you know, twice on each wheel. And then, and of course, with the adjuster screws back right off, did the whole process. And then once I felt all the air was out of the system, and then I went around and tightened up all the adjuster screws. And once I got all the air out of it as best I could, I just pulled down the pedal here, and I used a big C-clamp like this and just clamped it hard against the exhaust pipe here as far down as I could get it. I couldn't get it all the way to the pipe, but I just clamped it down hard as if you're pressing on the brake all the way, and just left the clamp on it overnight. And when I came back in the morning and let the clamp off, I had a really good solid pedal. So I don't know why that works, but it seems to, I don't know, open up the brake master cylinder so that any leftover bubbles can travel back up through the system into the reservoir. And yeah, it takes hours, I think. You just let it sit like that overnight, fully depressed, and seems to do the trick. So we got solid brakes now, on to the next thing. Meanwhile, other things on my list of things to do. I was never happy. I never got proper castle nuts here, like they should be with a cotter pin. These are new kingpins, and these are the Nyloc nuts that they came with. And what I've noticed is if I lift up, see that? There's like a 1/16 of an inch of play that you can see in the kingpin. Let's see if I can capture it here. Anyway, there needs to be either another shim washer inside of here, or this needs to be tightened down more. I'm not sure if this is all the way down. To figure it out, I'm gonna have to take it apart. And that means I've got to remove the brake line here. I've got to remove the coil spring, the steering arm, so that I can undo this joint, pull it out, and take the kingpin top off of that and see if I need to put any more spacers in it or if I can just tighten it down. Regardless, I'm going to replace that nut with a proper castle nut. It's a big job for, you know, a 1/16 of an inch travel, but it will give me the opportunity to properly replace that with a proper castle nut, and you know, better peace of mind. It's off the road for the next several months of winter anyway, so I might as well do it while I can. So as you can see, I've already removed the steering knuckle, had to use a ball joint splitter there, and I've removed the brake line, having drained the brake system first. Yeah, you know, I'll be replacing it with all new fluid. And so now to get the coil springs out safe and sound, I'm using these pieces of ready rod with some nuts and doubled washers. And I'll just do one on this side and one on the back side, and do them up tight. With each one, I take out the nut and bolt that normally go there, put the piece of ready rod, do that up tight. Now I can take this one out. And now with all of those, the original bolts are out, I can let off the ready rod and carefully let the spring out, a little bit at a time on each side. Nice and safe and easy, and gets the job done. Okay, so just about putting it back together. I'm just about to put the coil spring back in with the pan. You can see I've replaced this nut. I was able to get it down tighter. I put just another thin washer in there, and that took up all the slack, so we're nice and tight again. I've replaced the cotter pin there, and I've got a new cotter pin for here, but of course these were never meant to go with castle nuts. They came with those Nylocs, so I've actually got to drill a hole for the cotter pin to go in. So no problem. It's just an 1/8 inch drill bit for the cotter pin. We'll get those drilled and new pins installed. It'll be good to go. Okay, and here we are all fully reassembled. So I got the spring back in, just using those ready rods and getting them back in with the proper bolts and the little shake-proof washers and nuts underneath. And this varies, you know, later cars had the bolts coming up from the bottom, whereas these BN1s had the bolts coming down from the top with the nuts on the bottom with those shake-proof washers. So that's all back together nicely, and I reattached the steering arm with new cotter pins, and of course reattached the brake line, and then here's this new castle nut that I've installed on there. I had to drill that hole. Took a while going through that, but finally got her through, and new cotter pins installed. So, and that tightened it right up. There's no more play in that, so looking much better and much more original. So I just got to touch in the paint everywhere. I'll have to do that by hand, and that'll finish it off. Okay, and suspension is all back together, and really happy. I've got that castle nut and cotter pin in there. I've got them all retouched in now with paint, so looking really nice. Back here, I've got the new hub seals in, and I've gone through and checked and you know, removed each one of these electrical connections, made sure that they're good and clean, and put some electrical grease on them, and then reinstalled them and tested them, and everything's really solid there. All the battery helmets did the same thing, took them off, you know, gave them some fresh electrical grease and screwed them down all really tight. And just going through the car with a fine-tooth comb to make sure everything's making good connection. I've been getting into the engine bay here and just rechecking all of the grounds on the firewall. And BN1s, you know, all of these screws through the firewall have a separate nut on the inside, so it's tricky. You got to have a helper on the inside to hold the wrench and check all of those nuts and screws that are making good contact to the firewall to make a good ground. So I've rechecked all of those, and everything seems to be really solid right now. And I mean, I think they always were, is what I'm saying. Now, one more thing I've done here is I got myself a secondary distributor cap with new wires and new fittings. These are much more durable, robust, all the boots, than the original stuff I have, or the Concours Correct stuff I have. So I've got my Concours Correct, my original distributor cap with the proper wires and the proper boots, both styles of boots. These ones are numbered. It's molded into the rubber there on the original ones. So I've got that, you know, stored in the trunk. I can easily swap it in for judging, but for general running, I'm using this more modern, more efficient setup. So glad to have that on there, and we'll see if there's any improvement. Not that there was any problem before. Now, one more thing I'm gonna make is this fan setup. So one thing with my BN1, I will say the radiator seems to be quite sufficient in keeping the engine itself cool. I never ran into any problems of the engine overheating, even in spite of traffic situations. But what I did have a problem with was when I was in heavy traffic or stop and go or stuck at lights or whatever, the carburetors would start to boil. The float bowls would start to boil, because as you can see, there's like zero insulation here from the exhaust manifold, and it just gets so hot. And yeah, so I've been trying to come up with an idea to cool at least the float bowls themselves. And so yeah, that's where this comes in play. I got this Kurt Arch was actually coming up with this idea, so Thanks for the idea, Kurt. This is a Revotech fan you can buy online. Relatively cheap. I think it was like 60, 70 bucks, something like that. And it's reversible polarity, just for direction that the fan blows. You just can reverse the wires, and really simple. I've got some of this hose, same type of 4-inch hose that you use for like the fresh air hose on the far side there. And then I got this adapter piece. You can just, again, buy that, like, I think it was 10 bucks on Amazon or whatever. And you can see I've cut some little slots into this, and they are going to correspond with this fuel line, so I can clip it to the fuel line and have it blowing directly onto the float bowl when that's all hooked up. And then the hose will go down through the front there in that opening. And you can see down here, it's totally accessible. It'll come through here and have the fan right here in front of behind the grill there. So, and this whole unit, you know, I'll do it up with some 4-inch clamps on either end. This whole hose unit with the fan on one end and the adapter will be totally removable. I can lift it out of there if I ever want to get the car judged. So it'll be non-invasive, no holes to be drilled. And then the 2 wires, I think I'm just going to link them into the lighting wires. You can see there's a big junction there, and turn these into some bullets, wires, probably replace those wires. But yeah, I can just plug it in there so that I can make this thing run in conjunction with the side lights. So if I need the fan to come on, I'll just turn the side lights on, and keep it really simple that way. I don't even have to have a secondary switch. I can just have it linked into that circuit. And this is a really low amperage fan. Okay, and here we are. I've got it all mounted in there and wired in properly. So I've got the red wire goes into the red plug here. There was one opening available in the plug, so I was able to just put a bullet on it and pop it into that plug. So it's on the same circuit as, here's the red here for the side lamps, and then the black wire, the ground. Rather than trying to make a branch to be able to plug the black wire in here, because the one black connector here has already got 4 wires into it. So because it's just a ground, I just tapped into this ground right here. It's not a ground, it was just a wire clip for the harness that goes along the other side of that cross member. And so I just pulled the screw and nut out and scraped the paint away and made that into a proper ground. And then put the original screw and nut back in, and then added a secondary nut. So to take this whole thing out of here, all I've got to do is unplug the red and pull the nut off of the black there, and then I can just lift the whole thing out, and it'll be like it was never there. So that's beautiful, and as you can see, it fits nicely here. And yeah. So once I get the carburetors in there, I'll get this set up so it's blowing directly onto the float bowls. I might have to add like a zip tie or something to hold it in place. We'll see what I need to do to fine tune it, but that's great. So, and when I turn on my side lamps here, there she goes. Works like a charm. So, and oh yeah, that's tons of air coming out of there. That'll make a big difference for cooling. So very happy about that. Like I say, it only draws 1.5 amps, so shouldn't be any problem having it on this side light circuit. Very nice. Glad to have that. As you can see, I've removed the adapter piece on this because, you know, a couple people mentioned it doesn't help at all with aerodynamics. It actually decreases the amount of airflow by quite a bit, and there's no real sense in doing that. So I've removed it and actually used a bit of the wire internal to like wrap around this and help hold it. So I may end up doing like another clamp or something to hold it over. I'm a little worried about it getting sucked into the fan, so I want to make sure it's held over tight. And there is you know, I can go through one of the holes of this cross member just to keep it tight over here, so it's not going to be able to get sucked over in the wind. But yeah, this thing works. I'm excited to use this fan. It works really well. Lots of output for an amp and a half. So yeah, this is looking really good. On to the next thing. Now, one more thing I'll include in this video that I've recently added to my fuel filler cap. There was evidence of a chain, because there was that hook there always. This is my original cap. And of course this little bracket inside was always there. So there must have been a chain at some point. So yeah, I found an appropriate size brass chain and added it. So yeah, long enough to just neatly go down to the floor, and nice little touch. So I just wanted to show you guys this little accessory. This is actually a bit of a keepsake for me. My dad had this in his collection of stuff, and when he passed away, we found it in a box, and so I kept it. But it's an original BMC fire extinguisher for British cars, and really cool little thing. Has a big BMC logo with the instructions on it. Comes with these two little brackets for clipping it in place. And I've just had this literally on display in my display cabinets, but I thought, you know, I'm gonna get this thing filled, and then I'll have a functional authentic fire extinguisher in the cabin. So I'm gonna mount it so people can see it at least. Otherwise it's just sitting away, tucked away, and no one ever sees it. So yeah, and I figured out a way, a non-invasive way to mount this. It comes with these two little brackets that it clips to. I was just going through my car this morning, where can I put it? And here you can see I'm right above the parcel tray here on the firewall, and there's that row of blanking screws that were always there, and I've just utilized a couple of those for the brackets for the fire extinguisher. What those blanking screws are for, if you look on the other side of the firewall here, those are the relays for the overdrive, and so if this was a right-hand drive car, the relays would be over on that side. So wherever they're not, those holes are just blanked off with those screws. So that works really well. And yeah, so there's those brackets, and I can just plug the fire extinguisher in. And here we are. I'm just holding the light under here, but yeah, there you go. Fire extinguisher nicely mounted. Looks like it was meant to go there, really. And super easy access. You can just reach under the dash to grab it if it's ever, knock on wood, ever needed. Hopefully never. Yeah, but that looks beautiful. I'm really glad to have that keepsake little reminder of my dad, and yeah, neat little period accessory. On to the next thing. Okay, so just putting the wheels back on, and I just wanted to go through my process with wire wheels. Of course, I've got new wire wheels with new hubs, always recommended, because these can wear pretty badly, and you don't want a wheel spinning on the hub. And so to check the hub splines, you got to make sure that they are doing like an up crest and then back down, and they're not sharp. If they've gone sharp, they're no good anymore. Same thing with the wheel hubs. You got to check those and the hub here to make sure splines are in good condition. And then for lubrication, so that it doesn't all seize together, because oh boy, I've seen people who have not taken their wheels off for, you know, years and years, and the car has sat, and these become fused together if they weren't properly greased. So the factory workshop manual always used to call for grease, but nowadays I prefer to use this anti-seize. It's a nicer product, it's much cleaner, and really does a good job for this application. And plus you can buy it in this silver grade, and it's not as noticeable if a little bit oozes out here and there. So yeah, It's not good to mix this with standard grease because this has its own grease in it, and standard grease will just dilute this further, and you want to have a thicker substance. So, yeah, on clean hubs and splines, I brush it on there thoroughly. I make sure to get it onto the shoulder here. You can see where the shoulder rubs there. So the entire way, you want the splines and the outer threads where the hubcaps, or where the wheel spinner is going to go on, the knockoff. I also give a little bit of a coating on the knockoff and the wheel itself, just to make sure there's good coverage everywhere. So with that, we can put the wheel on and hammer down the knockoff, and we're good to go. Also, one more thing I'll point out. Before I put any grease on these new wheels, whenever you have new wheels, it's good to take some clear silicone and do a good heavy smear along the inside of where the spokes go. That way any grease or anti-seize or whatever you're using is not going to trickle out of the spokes here and create a mess on your spokes. So it's always good practice. Anytime you got new wheels like this, take the opportunity to give it a good smear of clear silicone on the inside there, as well as the inner hub there. I do both of those, and it makes a big difference, and it helps keep your wheels clean. And one final thing I'll show is just my process for getting the tires nice and clean. So when you buy new tires, they generally always come in coated with a release agent from manufacturer, and you'll never get them nice and black until you get that release agent off of them. So the product I use for that is this product called Super Clean. It's really caustic stuff. So you got to wear gloves when you use it, and make sure you don't get it on any surrounding metal or chrome or paint or anything like that, because it is quite caustic. It'll do damage to those things. But yeah, I just use it sparingly on a rag and just really scrub the sidewalls of the tire, and you'll see it coming, this release agent coming off, and then just give them a hose down with some water to neutralize the stuff, and you're good to go. And then once you've got the release agent off, then I use this this tire shine. I use this stuff from Chemical Guys, but I mean, there's any number of different tire shine things you can use. Yeah, I don't ever, once the release agent is off, I don't ever need to use this Super Clean again. It's only kind of a one-time thing to get them clean initially, and then I can just use the tire shine from then on. Of course, just regular washings with soapy water. And yeah, makes a really nice shiny tire. And that's a wrap. So the car's all ready and polished up for the next driving season. Really looking forward to it. I've been in a blizzard the last couple of days, so glad she's safe and sound in here. Until next time, I'm Geoff Chrysler, a detail enthusiast. Happy healing. We'll see you again.